All aboard. Welcome to the All Aboard podcast. I am your host, Brandon DeFreitas, finally bringing back an episode for Fantasy Chise. And embarrassingly, guys, I just had to record the opening 3 times. Like, that's how out of touch I've been, with this podcast. And, it's been a busy fall for all of us and, an exciting fall within the league that we're going to recap today. But we are getting back on the horse. Third try is the charm here for the start of the show, and we're gonna get going. It's gonna be a little bit of a brief episode. It's just me today. We've had a couple of guests lined up, and we're gonna push them back a little bit, probably to the off season at this point. I know Travers wants to talk about dynasty rules and sort of his experience, and I think that'll be really helpful for all of us. And then Ben and Jimmy will make an appearance. And I believe, that we have Alex and Will Tam remaining on the docket. So lots of episodes that are going to come. We're going to try to make it a little bit more regular for you. But I'm sure everyone knows how it is. It's the holidays. For those of us in tax, we had estimate season before. But enough about that. Let's get into the show. We're going to first touch on a recap of last week, talk about the two teams that have advanced, what went wrong for the teams that got eliminated, and then we're going to get into this week's matchups with maybe a few comments here and there about new rules or something. We'll mix it in. We'll keep you on your toes. But for the main part, we're going to be talking about playoffs because, quite frankly, to the non-playoff teams, myself included, too bad, so sad. You don't really get included in the podcast this time of year. It's just unfortunately the way it is. But looking at last week's matchups, I think the first one we'll cover here is Fatty Cats against, and as I'm saying that, I realize you can't read all the team names. So we have Ben versus Travers. This was, the projection had Travers at 157 to 146. He was a slight favorite. Travers ends up with a really disappointing week, only ending up with 113, where Ben goes out and puts up 154. And, one of the things that I think was a downfall for Travers here was just the fact that, and again, we're all busy and it's unfortunate for him, but he wasn't aware of Adam Thielen, that he wasn't necessarily fully healthy. That game ended up being a Monday Night Football game, and Thielen tried to work out that ankle pregame, and he wasn't ready to go. So the good news for Travers is that while Thielen was in his lineup and put up nothing, his only replacement available at the time was Ricky Seals-Jones, who, as I'm looking it up here, only put up 4.9 points. So it wasn't going to make the difference in his matchup. And you look at everyone on his bench, the highest positional bench player was Amir Abdullah, and he put up 13.5. So Ben was winning this matchup one way or another, the way it shook out. And it started off with a bang for Travers. Patrick Mahomes on that Thursday night. I remember I was complaining I'm in a different matchup against Mahomes in my redraft league, and Travers did the old reverse jinx. It was, third quarter, Mahomes has 5 points or something. Travers starts complaining. All of a sudden, he ends up with 35, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. The old reverse jinx brought him back, and I thought at that point, I think we all thought Travers was really going to come out with a strong performance, but unfortunately, it just didn't turn out that way for him. And you look at some of the players who disappointed. Joe Mixon only with 6.5 points. He's really hit a tough part of his calendar here. Fournette got hurt, and he was looking like he was going to have a big game. He had 4 catches on the first drive. DK Metcalf has just been a disappointment. And this is an interesting one to talk about long-term in the league. What do you do with DK Metcalf? I think when we look at the startup draft, I felt that way. I thought DK Metcalf was a young stud, someone you could build your team around for a long time. And I'm not so sure that's the case anymore, unfortunately, for Travers. And, I'll explain it a little bit too, because you're like, well, he's had some big games. Like DK Metcalf's great, but I mean, look at the efficiency. He had 12 targets this week, only caught 6 of them. And it's just so hard to explain why, Russell Wilson's connecting with Tyler Lockett, but he's not connecting with DK Metcalf. So I think it's a little concerning for Metcalf. I still think he's, a real solid player, but we went into this franchise sort of thinking he's an absolute wide receiver one for years. Maybe he's more of a high variance wide receiver two, and that's totally fine too. But that's just sort of what the season has been for Travers, I would say, on the DK Metcalf front. Another disappointing one, Amari Cooper, 1.8 points, and then the Adam Thielen 0 really killed him. So I really think that's where things went wrong for Travers. And on the flip side, I mean, Ben's been coming on. I know he was 7-7. He had a lot of unfortunate injuries that all hit after you all remember that week where it was the trade deadline week, or maybe it was the week before. Ben went in, he's bringing in these guys, Cordero Patterson, and then he makes a deal to get Brandon Cooks, and all of a sudden he loses Robert Woods. And we were actually out in Newport that day, and Ben's like, "You got to be kidding me." So I think Ben was stronger than the 7-7 record, and it showed. I mean, 154 points is real solid. Ends up taking the victory, and guys like Josh Allen's gonna always be. I think he's a quarterback one this year, if I'm not wrong. Always gonna keep him in it. Um, and then Justin Jefferson's been a stud. He has Gabe Davis who put up a great performance, and Matt Stafford. And I mean, here's something I think we've all sort of figured out. If you have two quarterbacks, like Ben's got Stafford and he has Josh Allen, it's just like it's real tough to compete against a team like that. Like if you look at my team, I've hit high scores from time to time, but it's hard for me to compete when I have Dak Prescott and I'm rolling out Jared Goff / Zach Wilson. It's like you just give up a lot of points at those positions. So maybe that's the way to make it, to build a champion. And as I say that too, you can counter and be like, well, Brandon, like, yeah, he has Matt Stafford and Josh Allen, but you look over at Edwin and Alex's team, which we're going to talk about in a little bit here, and they both don't have stud quarterbacks, and they're here in the semifinals as well. So multiple ways to slice it, but I think it worked out for Ben here. I think he's a strong contender, and I know John was on quite the roll at the end of the season here, but as we go look forward to that next matchup in a little bit, I think it's going to end up being more of a 50-50 between the two of them. It's going to be a battle. So definitely looking forward to that one. To recap the other one, and apologies guys, it's kind of funny. I was like, I meant to record the podcast today. We're having some family over tonight, and then I just completely forgot, and and they're over in 30 minutes now. So I'm like, I really want to get this podcast in. I don't want to miss another week. So it's going to be a little fast. We're going to cover some points, try to keep you guys laughing, keep you on your toes, like I said. So reviewing that other matchup from last week, Alex versus Mark, and holy cow, Mark, like projected for 164 and puts up 85. Like people have talked about this being one of the worst, one of the worst weeks of fantasy they've ever seen. And I mean, you look at Mark, he has good players, and a lot of them busted. He even got a big game from Justin Herbert, but you're looking 8 points from James Conner, 2 from Marvin Jones, 6 from Mike Williams. I mean, another receiver was hot to start the year and just fell off. 1.9 from Evans, who got hurt, 3.9 from Gronkowski, 2.5 from Shepard, who blew his Achilles, and then 4.7 from Brady. Like, just an absolute apocalypse week for Mark. And we sort of said this all season long, and I'm not trying to say I told you so to Mark, but at the same token, he just has so many bucks, and they didn't score any points, which is crazy to say, but the Saints shut them out, and that was enough to shoot him down. But my brother and I have been in our home league with John B ever since 2006, and there have been multiple times where you have a team. John had the Cardinals one year, and he had Kurt Warner, Anquan Bolden, and John's gonna kill me. I can't remember the third piece. Was it Larry Fitzgerald? I don't think it was Fitzgerald. John definitely hit us up in the message board, but he had 3 strong Cardinals pieces that year, and they were awesome. But then this was I think it was 2009, and they had a game in New England late in the season, and bad weather in the snow, and the Cardinals crapped the bed, and John just couldn't win. And like the lesson from there was like, if you're too committed in one team, like it's just so tough. Like it can work if it's a juggernaut offense, but one game in the playoffs, one game of that team not scoring, and you're out. And I think that's how I would generally summarize Mark's team. Of all the playoff teams, the ones that we looked at this so far, I just look at Mark's team, and some of it's due to injury, some of it's due to the age he drafted. I think a rebuild might be on the horizon, or I mean, maybe he doubles down, but you look at some of these players, Marvin Jones, how much value does he have left? You look at, Mike Evans is getting long in the tooth too. I'm sure he's going to be good as long as Brady's there, but I mean, Evans, Gronkowski, Sterling Shepard with the Achilles, like I mentioned, at his age, that's usually a career-ending injury, unfortunately for him. Tom Brady, but I'm not going to predict that either. And then some older guys on the bench too. So DeAndre Hopkins is another. Michael Thomas, he's definitely aging. The good news for him, though, looking forward, is having Herbert and Mac Jones is just going to be a nice young core for him. So I don't think he necessarily, maybe it's like a half rebuild. He doesn't have to, tear it down to the studs, but it's definitely getting closer to a rebuild for him. Switching over to the other side of the matchup, Alex scores 116, gets the win, which you might be like, oh, what a crummy win. But you kind of look at the other playoffs, teams in the playoffs. Travers put up 113, Alex put up 116. So the two highest scoring teams in the wild card round both advance. And I think that's, what you like to see. And this is one of those teams we've said all season, Alex at the quarterback, Tua, and he had Davis Mills, who's been a nice ad for Alex. I mean, he looks like a competent quarterback. That one could work out. I mean, 18.5 from Davis Mills, 17.7. It's solid, and it's solid enough with his roster. And what's going to make Alex dangerous going forward in this playoffs and in the future too is Jonathan Taylor is a bona fide stud, and he has Jamar Chase. So like we're looking at like a 4 to 5 year period of Alex potentially having the top running back, and it wouldn't surprise me, guys, the top wide receiver. So I think Alex has a really strong team, especially skill position wise, and he just needs to piece together the quarterbacks. But when you look at what Alex and Edwin have done this season, maybe it's more doable than we thought. So there's something to be said for that. And as I go here, switch it over to week 16, quick transitional period. Let's talk a little bit about the rules coming up. We will have, as I've mentioned before, the lottery draft, or the lottery is coming up, and that's going to be championship week. I want to do it maybe midweek, like a live event for our league. I have an Excel workbook I built out. It will be sent out to all the league members to pick apart, the logic so that they can make sure it's totally fair. But what's going to end up happening is you have Tam with 50% chance. You have John B with 25, myself with 15, and Jimmy with 10%. And it's just going to repeat. Like Tam can be the first pick, Tam can be the fourth pick. And so each time someone gets taken out, their lottery balls are removed from the equation and your percentage goes up. So that's how it's going to work. Definitely excited to get that going. And, I'm excited to see what draft pick I am, if I'm being honest, as a non-playoff team, something to look forward to. On top of that too, if you're in the playoffs, I think we've mentioned a couple times, it's reverse order of regular season standings, unless you make the championship game, in which you'll be the two last picks. So with that, Mark has locked up the 6th pick. Little known fact, I struggle with that word all the time. I'm not going to say that again. And then Travers has locked up the 8th pick in the draft, which coincidentally it was the Adam Thielen trade. So I am now 8th. 1.8 for Adam Thielen. I'm happy with it. I'd be interested to see what Travers thinks at this time. Travers, again, post on the board. Would love to hear your thoughts on the trade now that we know what draft pick it is. So circling back to the matchups, some big ones. I already touched a lot on, John versus Ben And the projections right now are 165.7 for John to 159.16. We're very accurate here on the Old Board podcast. We want to make sure we're down to the decimal point. I'm sorry, like it's client service. That's the business we're in. And we're going to make sure we get you all the information that's relevant to you listening to this show. And that joke aside, you look at the matchup here, and John's been on fire this season, but he's really getting killed with COVID. And I will spend a minute here just saying, I feel bad for all of you guys who, these are the semifinal teams. I don't feel bad for you being in the semifinals, but especially in a dynasty, like, a team like John, he made, a future sacrifice to invest in a team and a window sooner. And to have one of those years be a COVID year where unfortunately, like this new variant is just so transmissible from what we've been hearing, and it's spreading through the NFL. You're just going to have to duck and weave, and it's probably not going to be the best team that wins the championship, but it's going to be the healthiest team that wins the championship. So really unfortunate. I feel for you guys. Trust me. And another PSA too, while we're at it, like, I think we have enough roster spots and deep enough rosters. We have 2 IR spots on top of it. I don't think it's going to be an issue fielding a team. But if you truly just happen to have an apocalypse on your team and you feel like you have to drop a player that hurts you long term, like, I'm not talking some like roster fodder person like me being like, I don't want to drop Braxton Berrios. Like, okay, shut up. Come on. But like, if you have an actual, like, I'm dropping a player who no one would drop to like field the starting lineup, just reach out to me and we can discuss it. We can post a poll or vote on it. Like, we don't want anyone to have to do that because of these these COVID outbreak. But to be honest too, like, what are you going to get off waivers at this point in the season in this dynasty league? So I don't think there are many starters out there, but if you are having that situation, please reach out and let me know. I assume most would. Looking at this matchup, like I said, it's pretty close to even. No idea how Sleeper has it at 60-40, but we don't really know how they do their percentages. What's disappointing for John is like Lamar Jackson, and I don't want to put him on blast, but it's been a tough season. I've had him in redraft. He missed a game due to illness. And now it looks like he might miss another game due to this ankle sprain that initially it sounded like he could play through. So John really needs him, because if it's not Lamar, I mean, he's got the Lamar Aaron Rodgers, and that's the strong quarterbacks matchup. And his alternatives are Cam Newton and Derek Carr. Derek Carr against Denver, Cam Newton against Tampa Bay. So and it's the best he can do. I'm not blaming John for that. He's got more depth at quarterback than any of us, but it's tough. And hopefully John doesn't have to worry about that. But this sort of like, I just pieced it together in my head. We have John versus Ben, who have the major double quarterback strategy. You got Lamar Jackson, Aaron Rodgers, and then you have Josh Allen, Matt Stafford. And on the other side of the coin, you have the Edwin Alex we're going to talk about, which is, I'm going to load up on skill positions and I'm just going to figure out quarterback. So very interesting. And it means that no matter what happens, the finals is going to be power quarterbacks versus I might lose my job this season quarterbacks. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how that works out. More on this matchup though. Tough for John with some of the COVID, restrictions going on. I believe he does have Tyler Lockett. Hopefully he can make it back, and Travis Kelce. So those are 2 key players for John. I think he's going to need them if he wants to take Ben out, especially Kelce, because Kelsey's a positional advantage for him. And he actually has Dawson Knox too. Whereas you look at Ben's side and he's rolling out Cole Kmet. And that's a position I know Ben's tried to address. He's going to potentially try a little more this offseason, I'd imagine. But I mean, that's the positional advantage for John, and one thing that I think he can really have. So he badly needs Travis Kelce to come back from the COVID list in time for this game. On Ben's side, I think a couple players that are concerning. Cordero Patterson is only getting work in the run game now. He's being used just as like a bruising running back, And I mean, he only had 2 targets last week. And I think that severely limits his value, unfortunately, for him. And then I had someone else too. Let me scroll down. Maybe that's it. I don't know. Michael Pittman. Michael Pittman really struggled against JC Jackson last week. Against Arizona, maybe it's a little bit better, but I mean, that Indianapolis team they're looking to establish it. So, I'm not sure how much targets you can expect from Michael Pittman. Still a really good player, but I look at Ben's team. He's got other good pieces too that we talked about before, and he's rolling in here. I think he's got a legitimate chance to win this game against John. Um, John, like I said, Lamar is the big one for him, and so is Travis Kelce. I think he could replace Tyler Lockett, but better off for him not to go down that road, especially when he's already starting Robbie Anderson, who, I mean, has there been that's been a significant disappointment right there in Carolina. So yeah, this matchup, I'm not going to make predictions because I don't want to, I don't want to sway. And we have there is definitely, we had the reverse jinx last week. I don't want any commissioner jinxes going on from the podcast. So I'm not going to pick matchups, but rather point out interesting things on each side. Um, and then for John, I do think Najee Harris, I have him in one of our redrafts, and he's really slowed down lately. He had the big game against Minnesota, but that was more touchdown related. Before that, he's more in the teens, and he's hit single digits 2 of the past 4 weeks. So hopefully he can get it going against Kansas City for John. But that's this matchup. Really exciting. The power quarterbacks. I'm excited to see how that comes out, and I'm really excited for the finals for the power. It's like the studs and scrubs matchup at the quarterback position for the finals. And as I get to the other game here, Alex Edwin. Quick aside, I gotta tell you guys, like, the desktop on Sleeper is not as good as the app. So I'm surprised they haven't updated for that, but certainly this is harder to navigate. All right, so we have Alex projected for 154.95, Edwin 150.64. And guys, you got to get excited for this. Like, Edwin and John had the buys, they look really strong, but these teams, Alex and Ben aren't backing down. And like, I just read off the projections, they're both really close. So currently, Alex projected to win. We'll see what happens. The Scrubs quarterback matchup, Jimmy Garoppolo and Kirk Cousins versus Davis Mills and Tua Tagovailoa. Yeah, maybe I got that. And, looking at some of the pivot options from on the bench, Alex can't go Daniel Jones or Trey Lance. So it is Mills and Tua. And you look at Edwin, I doubt he rolls out Matt Ryan, even against Detroit. And then he's probably not rolling out Carson Wentz either. So, yeah, I mean, look, Kirk Cousins is inconsistent. Like, I know he's had some big games, but that's sort of how he is. And then Jimmy G's I think he's been playing really good real life football, but unfortunately, like, they like to run Deebo Samuel, Jeff Wilson, anyone they can, Kyle Juszczyk, they'll use them all in the red zone. So I do think that lowers the upside for Jimmy in fantasy. And Tua is a similar thing for Alex too. And like I said about Davis Mills, he's actually been okay, and might have been a mistake drop by Jimmy. This week, though, the Chargers, they're really good against the pass. I know it wasn't against Mahomes. I mean, I know it didn't play out against Mahomes, but this is Davis Mills after all. So that might be a little bit of tough matchup for Alex. But then you go down these skill positions like, I mean, Edwin, David Montgomery, Zeke, Devontae Adams, Renfro, Ertz, Javonte Williams, Damian Harris, Tony Pollard, Devonta Smith. Like, holy cow, I wish I could roll out a lineup like that. That's awesome. And then Alex, Jonathan Taylor, Alvin Kamara, Deebo Samuel, Jamar Chase, Dalton Schultz, okay, Josh Reynolds, Chase Claypool, Odell Beckham, Marquise Brown. So, and both teams have guys on the bench. Alex has Eli Mitchell, who's out on the bench. And I read off Edwin's lineup. That's assuming that Dalvin Cook was taken out for COVID, which unfortunately he is unvaccinated, so that's 10 days. So he will miss this game. I haven't done the math, but maybe hopefully back for a potential championship. But that's a really tough break for Edwin. Reading that off, I think Edwin's advantage is probably in the flex positions. Alex, Reynolds, Claypool, Beckham, Brandt, Hollywood against Devonta Smith, Pollard, Damian Harris, and Javonte Williams. I'd give the edge to Edwin there. And that's probably where I see this matchup really playing out, is at the flex spots. We'll see, though. I mean, Odell's got a lot of upside. He's against Minnesota. Claypool, I mean, he hasn't scored many touchdowns this year, and he's gotten some yardage, some bonehead plays on the field as well, as we've seen. So this should be a really, really good matchup. And I mean, Jonathan Taylor, like, I you got to be shaking in your boots a little bit if you're Edwin. I think Alex has a little bit more of the high end of the running backs, and Edwin's got a little bit more of the depth. So it'll be very interesting to see how this plays out. I'm excited. To all four of you guys, congratulations. I think these are the four best teams that ended up making it to the semis, and rightfully so. So congrats on doing that. Not easy to do, especially in a startup year where a lot of us are new. I think everyone in the semis is new to Dynasty. So you've all done a fantastic job. Edwin, you've shed completely the Madden 11 title. I'm happy for you, buddy. We can now, call Mark Madden 11 if you want, up to you. But that's where we're at. And I think that pretty much wraps up the podcast. Like I said, I think Travers is going to come on, do some rules in a little bit, do a little, we're going to have our first 3-person podcast when we get Jimmy and Ben on. So I'm fired up for that. Maybe we'll just, finish it off with a little rule discussion too. The last thing I posted this week was just about, after the season, trading's going to open up. And I think we'll do something where we open up trading for a week, maybe two. Maybe two is too much, but some period of time. And we're going to have a roster cut down before you go into off season, just because I want to keep it even. I want every team to be able to hold the same amount of players, taxi aside, because if you don't manage your taxi a certain way, like, that's your own fault. But I look at IR spots and I say, just because maybe you have a guy who got injured, and like, I'm trying to think, I don't have one, so I can't use myself as an example, but any player that's injured and you just happen to be able to stash another player, it's like, there's really no IR in the off season. So we're not going to allow people to hold in there. So we're gonna have a roster trimmed down where you clear out your IRs, and your second year player, your sophomore players, you have to promote them from the taxi. You can still keep those rookies, like these rookies, you can keep them on taxi for another year. So that doesn't count against your lineup. But we're going to clear out the second year players. They have to get promoted or cut or something. And I think this will be a fun way to start off the off season, because we're allowing trading before then, so that, like, if you just have a lot of depth and you're like, I want to do a package of 2-for-1 and get value instead of just cutting these guys, totally fine. But I think between the trade volume and the waivers and the cuts, it should really kick off the offseason in the right way. And one last piece on that cut down, the fab budgets will be reset for everyone. I haven't decided 50 or 100 for the offseason yet, but whatever it ends up being, you'll have a fresh budget going into the offseason that will last you from the offseason through week 1, where it will reset next year. So you have to remember, that's for this cut down day. That's for NFL free agency, anything that happens you want to react to, the draft, anything you want to react to, and then throughout the preseason. So training camp and the preseason. So keep that in mind. That's what that budget is, but we're always going to reset, keep it fair going forward. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. I appreciate it. Apologies, this was a little rushed, but I thought a little rushed is better than going another week without a podcast. Good luck to Edwin, Alex, John, and Ben. Really hope you guys, I'm pulling for all you guys, and I hope you guys all have great performances. I don't want any duds. I don't want, I want to minimize COVID deciding it, but good luck to all of you, and we will see you next week to recap, preview the championship. And you know what? Next week it will be lottery time, baby. So us non-playoff teams, will be talking more about us. Again, thanks for listening. Brandon DeFreitas, your host and commissioner. See you next time.